All right, so today we're going to dive deep into the world of Indian sports, but through a very specific lens.
Hi.
PT Usha.
Oh.
You know, I mean, everybody knows PT Usha, right?
Of course, the Golden Girl.
The Golden Girl, exactly. Yeah, from back in the 80s.
Yeah.
But she's no longer on the track.
Right.
She is now the president of the IOA,
Wow.
the Indian Olympic Association.
A very different race.
A very different race. And we've got some really fascinating material to dig into that gives us a candid look at the challenges she's facing, what she's hoping to achieve, and also just some really powerful reflections on her journey.
I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. So it's this really interesting story of an icon stepping into a whole different arena.
Absolutely. And I think it's more than just a former athlete taking on an administrative role, right?
Right.
I mean, PT Usha brings such a unique perspective. Having experienced the highs and lows of elite competition firsthand,
Yeah.
I think this deep dive gives us a chance to really understand the complexities of leading a major sporting body when you've also stood on the podium, or as in her case, just a hair's breadth away.
Yeah, and I think that's something that we really want to dig into, right? Because it's one thing to sort of observe and analyze sports from afar, but to actually have lived it,
Right.
to have felt that pressure, to have tasted both victory and defeat.
Absolutely.
It's got to give you a whole different understanding of what it takes to support athletes on that journey.
Completely. And also the challenges of the systems that are in place or not in place
Exactly.
to support those athletes.
Exactly.
So yeah, I think this is going to be fascinating.
Yeah, so let's get straight to it. Since she took on the helm of the IOA in January of 2024,
Right.
It sounds like it's been anything but a victory lap.
Right.
We're hearing about some pretty significant turbulence,
Yeah.
particularly around the appointment of the CEO, and then there's all these rumblings of discontent within the executive council.
That's interesting.
What's your take on what's going on there?
Well, it strikes me that her analogy of the IOA presidency being a hurdles race isn't just a figure of speech, right?
Right.
Like it really captures the dynamic nature of the challenges she's facing.
Yeah.
It's not like a static set of obstacles, but they're constantly new ones appearing,
Right.
And her core drive seems to be about bringing this new level of professionalism and good governance to Indian Sports Administration with a clear focus on the athletes.
It definitely sounds like she's pushing against some kind of established norms or
Pushing against the wind a bit, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, we've heard that a significant chunk of the executive council, like a dozen members,
Wow.
if you can believe it, haven't actually ratified the CEO appointment.
That's a lot.
It's a lot. And this is despite it following all the laid down procedures like the IOA Constitution, the IOC guidelines,
Right.
and even recommendations from Justice Nagaswara Rao.
So everything's been ticked off.
Everything's been ticked off, and yet
Still pushback.
still pushback. Yeah. What do you think is behind that level of resistance?
I think that degree of dissent, right, involving a majority of the council really suggests a potential fundamental difference in vision for the IOA,
Okay.
right? Are we seeing a clash between like a desire for swift modernization and professionalization championed by Usha
Okay.
and perhaps a more cautious approach or even the protection of existing power structures within the organization?
Right.
It's fascinating how, following due process doesn't always guarantee unanimous agreement in these kind of complex environments.
Right. And it kind of makes you wonder if there's that much friction at the top, how effectively can they really function as an organization,
Right.
when it comes to the bigger picture of supporting athletes and developing sports?
Well, and she didn't hold back in pointing that out.
Yeah.
Like she clearly sees a lack of teamwork
Yeah.
within sports governance. And it really does make you wonder if the leadership isn't aligned
Yeah.
on such a foundational administrative appointment.
Mhm.
How can they really implement these broader strategic initiatives?
Yeah. Are they going to be constantly kind of, battling each other?
Yeah, fighting fires, putting out fires, as opposed to, being proactive.
Exactly. Yeah.
It really highlights the need for strong leadership
Hmm.
to build consensus and articulate a really compelling shared vision for the future
Yeah.
of Indian sports.
This all feels particularly relevant when we consider India's bid to host the 2036 Olympics.
Huge.
Huge.
Yep.
Yeah. How do you see these kind of internal headwinds within the IOA potentially jeopardizing that bid?
It's interesting when we connect these internal challenges to the Olympic bid, Usha's perspective becomes really clear.
Yeah.
She sees a credible bid as being built on this rock-solid foundation
Okay.
of meticulous planning, world-class infrastructure,
Of course.
and absolutely crucially impeccable governance.
Yeah.
And so the appointment of a CEO and this well-functioning administrative structure,
Sure.
they're not just boxes to tick.
Yeah.
These are vital signals to the international community that India is a serious and reliable contender,
Right.
capable of managing an event of that magnitude.
Yeah.
And any perception of internal disarray could really undermine that message.
So they're not just looking for impressive stadiums.
No.
They want to see a stable organization.
Exactly. The International Olympic Committee is going to be scrutinizing India's organizational capacity,
Yeah.
its commitment to transparency,
Yeah.
and its ability to deliver on its promises.
Right.
And if the IOA appears to be struggling with internal disagreements
Yeah.
and these administrative hurdles,
Yeah.
it could definitely cast a shadow over India's readiness to host the Games.
So there's a lot at stake.
A lot at stake.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think Usha's urgency in wanting to get the IOA's house in order really underscores those high stakes.
Another thing that really caught my attention was that there hadn't been an executive committee meeting for a full 18 months,
Wow.
which seems like an extraordinarily long period.
Yeah, for a major sporting body to go without formal recorded meeting, that's quite something.
Yeah. What do you think the implication of that is?
Well, I love how she described it as invisible minutes, right?
Yes.
It really paints this vivid picture.
Yeah.
The decisions were being made outside of these established formal processes
Right.
without official documentation.
Right.
And while informal discussions, obviously they happen in every organization,
Sure.
the absence of recorded decisions can lead to a lack of accountability and transparency,
Yeah.
and potentially even inconsistencies in policy implementation.
It's almost like trying to navigate without a map
It's-
or any written directions.
Right.
You might eventually get there,
You might.
but it's going to be a lot more chaotic.
A lot more bumpy.
Yeah.
And prone to wrong turns.
Yeah, and yet despite these issues, the IOA has managed to achieve some pretty notable successes,
They have.
like securing sponsorships, enhancing athlete welfare initiatives,
Hmm.
ensuring smooth preparations for Paris 2024,
Right.
and the national games in Uttarakhand. So it seems
Absolutely.
like things are happening.
Things are happening, but I think your observation is really astute that
Yeah.
while there might be friction at the highest levels of governance, the people on the ground who are working to support the athletes and organize events are still delivering.
Yeah.
But long-term strategic planning and consistent policy development, they suffer when the executive body isn't meeting regularly and documenting its decisions.
Right, so you can keep the trains running on time,
Yeah,
but you need to be figuring out where the tracks are going.
exactly. Yeah. Where are we headed?
Let's talk about this issue of ad hoc committees.
Okay.
It sounds like a bit of a tightrope walk.
A little bit, yeah.
We saw the Delhi High Court's criticism regarding the Boxing Federation,
Right.
but then the Sports Ministry was advocating for a similar approach with the Wrestling Federation of India, the WFI.
Yeah. It's a very tricky situation.
What's the underlying logic here?
Well, it highlights this delicate balance
Okay.
between autonomy and accountability in sports governance, right?
Yeah.
The IOA Constitution, drawing from the Olympic Charter and IOC guidelines,
Right.
does provide a mechanism for intervention in national sports federations when they face these significant crises, like governance failures or breaches of the National Sports Code, as was the case with the WFI.
Right.
And so the objective behind forming ad hoc committees in those situations
Yeah.
is typically to protect the interests of the athletes when the established leadership is compromised or under scrutiny.
So it's essentially a safeguard
Yeah.
to make sure that the athletes aren't penalized by any kind of administrative turmoil.
Exactly. And this concept of post facto approval within the IOA Constitution
Right.
attempts to reconcile the need for swift action in these urgent situations
Yeah.
with the principles of due process and collective decision-making. So it allows the president to take necessary steps to address an immediate crisis
Okay.
and then seek formal ratification from the Executive Council at a later stage.
Got it.
And so the criticism from the Delhi High Court in the boxing case likely centered on whether the situation truly warranted bypassing prior consultation,
Right.
or if the subsequent approval process adhered strictly to the IOA's rules.
It sounds like a constant negotiation.
Yeah, it is.
Between the need for, decisive leadership
Yes.
to address problems quickly and the importance of adhering to these procedures
Yeah,
and making sure everybody's on board.
it's a tough balance.
It is a tough balance.
Yeah.
I want to shift gears a little bit to something a bit more personal.
Okay.
PT Usha's reflections on missing an Olympic medal by that tiniest of
Oh,
margins.
yeah, just 0.01 seconds.
0.01 seconds in 1984.
Heartbreaking.
Heartbreaking. And, hearing that she had such limited experience in the 400-meter hurdles before those games
Really?
really puts it into perspective.
Yeah.
She'd only run it twice competitively in India
Wow.
and won by huge distances, like nobody was even close.
So her third competitive race in the event was at the Olympics.
At the Olympics,
Wow.
which is just astonishing.
That's incredible.
And then to have the added pressure of the restart in the final.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
Which, obviously just throws off your focus and your anxiety. Yeah.
Completely, yeah. You got to reset everything, and your adrenaline's already pumping.
Oh, absolutely. And, for her to find a sense of peace with that
Yeah.
and to still feel like she has a legacy, even without that medal,
Yeah.
I think speaks volumes.
It really does. It underscores that impact and legacy extend far beyond just the medals tally.
Yeah.
Right? Like her story of overcoming adversity, of pushing her limits, and the mark she left on Indian sport.
Yeah.
It clearly resonates deeply with the public.
Yeah.
The powerful reminder that the journey and the spirit with which you compete
Yeah.
often leave a more lasting impression than the final result.
Now, there's been a lot of buzz about the potential visit of Lionel Messi to Kerala.
Oh, yeah. Huge for Indian football.
Huge. And, PT Usha had some really interesting thoughts about what kind of impact that might have.
I'm curious to hear what she thought.
Well, she was very pragmatic. She acknowledged the initial excitement.
Yeah.
But she also emphasized that, you need sustained grassroots level development
Right.
for it to really make a difference.
You can't just have a one-off visit and expect everything to magically change.
Exactly. And she actually compared it to what happened after Abhinav Bindra won the Olympic gold in shooting.
Oh, interesting.
There was this initial surge of interest,
Right.
but it didn't really translate into long-term growth.
Right. So it's about how do you translate those moments of individual brilliance
Yeah.
or the fleeting excitement of a high-profile visit into real, tangible, long-term growth.
Exactly. It's that difference between like a momentary spike in enthusiasm and then the hard work of actually building a system
The hard work, yeah,
from the ground up.
absolutely.
Now, we know that there's been a lot of talk about a biopic on her life.
Oh, yeah, that's been in the works for a while.
It has, and it hasn't really materialized.
Right.
And her reasons for the delay, I think, are quite revealing.
Okay.
She's very focused on the fact that her story is still unfolding.
She's not done yet.
She's not done yet, exactly. And she
Yeah.
wants to make sure that whoever plays her can actually, portray that athleticism.
Oh, yeah. She doesn't want it to be inauthentic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And she even mentioned that, Katrina Kaif was being considered.
Oh, wow.
But, she's getting older.
Yeah.
So it's a tough role to fill.
A tough role to fill.
And finally, when we think about her legacy,
Yes.
it's clear that for PT Usha, it's very personal.
Okay.
It's not just about the medals or the records. It's about being remembered authentically for who she is.
As PT Usha.
As PT Usha. And the fact that people still recognize her and call her by name
Wow.
really means a lot to her.
It's that recognition of her individual identity, her struggles and her triumphs.
Exactly.
Yeah, that she values most.
And her hope of inspiring future generations of athletes from all over the country, I think,
Yeah.
is really the heart of her legacy.
A beautiful sentiment.
So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive into PT Usha's world,
Yeah.
it's clear that we've explored this journey of an extraordinary individual. Somebody who continues to embody resilience, profound dedication to Indian sports,
Yeah.
and a remarkably candid approach to the challenges
Yeah.
that she faces as the head of the IOA.
And her transition from the track to the complexities of sports administration,
Yeah,
it's such a compelling narrative.
it is.
Filled with these immense opportunities and considerable hurdles.
Yeah.
And I think her insights offer this valuable glimpse into the realities of sports governance in India
Yeah.
and the ongoing efforts to really elevate the nation's standing.
On the world stage.
Absolutely.
And so that brings us to a final thought for you.
Okay.
Reflecting on PT Usha's remarkable journey
Yeah.
and this whole landscape of sports administration,
Right.
what qualities do you believe are essential for effective leadership, especially when an organization or even a whole field is undergoing this kind of transformation?
It's a big question.
It is a big question. And how can we as a nation that's so passionate about sports
Yes.
balance the celebration of individual achievements?
Yeah.
Right.
With the work of building systems that will support the next generation of champions.
Something to think about.
Something to think about. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Thank you.
We'll see you next time.
Looking forward to it.